Hey everyone, this is the Rewriter writing in. For today's video, I will be reviewing Spider-Man No Way Home. To say the least, Tom Holland's Spider-Man movies have not been my favorite, though I don't hate them. For me, they haven't really felt like true Spider-Man movies, but more so like cookie-cutter MCU films. But with all the hype, speculations, and rumors floating around this film, does it live up to this tidal wave of hype, or does it sink under the pressure? Before we begin the review, if at any point you enjoy the video, leave a like and subscribe, it really helps me out. But now, let's dive into the spoiler review of Spider-Man No Way Home. First, let's talk about Peter and his friends. As far as the main three go, their dynamic in this movie is awesome. Ned is still incredible as the guy in the chair, and he's just as hilarious in this movie as he always is. I definitely have my issues with this version of MJ, as I'm just not a fan of her always pessimistic attitude. I tend to find it kind of annoying, but I feel that she definitely is her best in this film. Even though she's still a pessimist, she's a lot more willing to have hope and joy, as well as just being a much kinder and compassionate person. You can easily tell how much she cares not only about Peter, but about Ned as well. She's finally a good friend, and I like that a lot. As far as Peter is concerned, I think that he's better in this film than in the other ones. Now, hear me out on this because I know a lot of people love Tom Holland. I was never a fan of the idea of Tony Stark being Peter's mentor, because I always felt that it watered down the character of Spider-Man a bit, as he's always needing to get bailed out or have someone tell him what to do. I get that he's just a kid and needs help, but a part of the fun of reading or watching Spider-Man content is seeing him make mistakes as a kid and learning to become a top-tier superhero in adulthood. So with Tony out of the way for a couple movies now, it finally gives Peter the chance to shine as his own hero, and it's really refreshing. His suits are all pretty cool, especially his one at the end of the movie, but we'll talk about that later. As far as Happy and May, their dynamic of will they won't they is always amusing, as I just love both of these actors and think they have good chemistry together. Now, speaking specifically about Aunt May, she is great in this movie, as the one who's able to bring Peter back to center when he's off track, finally saying the classic responsibility line. She has been really fantastic in this series as a loving, positive example to Peter in his early days of crime fighting, and the impact of her loss is truly felt by not only Peter and his friends, but also by the audience. Her death is a defining moment in Peter's life, even more so than Tony's, and that loss sets up this next trilogy of Tom Holland's in a fascinating direction. I love that this movie allowed Peter to go to a truly dark place, wanting to kill Green Goblin. Letting us see his ferocity and anger in dealing with May's death was so refreshing, as I feel the MCU tends to stray away from this time to time, especially with this version of Spider-Man. Maybe we'll get to see a more unhinged version of Spider-Man, as he has no one to care or worry about anymore. He's now solely fighting a war against crime all on his own. Lastly, I want to talk about Doctor Strange. From the trailers, I was confused as to why he would ever risk manipulating time for Peter, and how he did such a bad job at casting a spell. Now, the reason that the spell was cast so badly was because Peter kept changing the stipulations of the spell, causing it to go haywire. Now, I will say, one of my only nitpicks was how they explained why he cast the spell. Strange says that the spell is simple and easy to cast, and that he's used it before, so he'll do it for Peter. I guess this works, but it just feels weird to me that Doctor Strange, someone so intimately familiar with the ramifications of trying to change the past or future, would so quickly do this for Peter, knowing full well of the terrible things that can happen. This aspect felt off and a bit too obvious as a setup for the multiverse of madness, but it's not a big deal in the grand scheme of things. So now let's talk about the villains. I was scared that they were going to bring all these villains in the movie, but change them completely into comedians or change their personalities in unrecognizable ways. I'm glad to report that my fears were alleviated, as all the villains are portrayed identically to how they were in their respective movies, as well as giving them further arcs that build on their characters. The way each villain was handled was perfect. Doc Ock's arms still had control over Otto, and when he was freed from them, he went back to being the good man he used to be, trying to help people. The Lizard, while being probably the most minor of the villains here, still felt authentic, as he wanted to free mankind of the shackles of being human. Sandman was great, as he's never a true villain, more so just a desperate man with bad luck, and this is shown very well here. Electro is still struggling with wanting recognition and respect, as these are things that he never had before getting his powers. And Norman Osborn was great, who really is the main villain of this story, as his actions caused the supervillains who were being helped by Peter to turn on him, as well as being responsible for May's death. His character in this movie is unbelievably amazing, as he is still struggling with the goblin in his head. I was unsure of just how much Willem Dafoe would be able to do, seeing as how he's much older now than he was in the original Spider-Man movie 20 years ago. But to my amazement, he's still just as physical and capable as he was back then, completely owning Peter in the apartment fight. I loved seeing how powerful Green Goblin is, as he really is Peter's true nemesis. But the best part was that they had him say the classic meme line of being something of a scientist. That was just so awesome. Now, Venom only showed up at the very end, but when he went back to his own universe, some of the symbiote remained, teasing that Venom could be the next villain. This would make perfect sense, as Peter is holding a lot of anger, pain, and sorrow within himself, and he has no one else to share these feelings with. The symbiote feeds on these aspects, so I think it's pretty likely that we are going to see a black suit Spider-Man pretty soon. So all the villains were all fantastic, no complaints from me. Let's now get to the real juicy part of the movie, Peter's other allies. The movie theater that I went to see this at went banana over all these reveals, which made it so much fun to be at. Now the first big character that showed up was Charlie Cox's Matt Murdock. Daredevil is by far the best superhero show ever made, and the fact that they are giving Charlie Cox the role back is so exciting, as I think he played an incredible Matt and Daredevil. I'm so excited to see what they'll do with him next. Now this wasn't in the movie, but I wanted to bring this up too, but I love that they're also bringing in Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin into the MCU through glimpses in the Hawkeye show. It was really stupid in my opinion for Marvel to cancel this show in particular, but I'm so glad that they're doing the right thing by not wasting incredible star power. But then we had the showstoppers, Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire back as Peter Parker and Peter Parker. This is an unpopular opinion, but Andrew Garfield is my favorite Spider-Man, so seeing him back made me emotional for sure. I love me some Tobey Maguire too, and was so hyped to see him here, but it was really cool seeing Garfield. The way they all act was perfect to how they are in the movies, so it was really fun seeing them all interact. All three of them are a bit awkward, so they all react to each other's awkwardness in funny ways. And seeing them act as mentors and supports for Tom's Peter Parker, especially when May died, was really incredible. Hearing Andrew Garfield talk about Gwen's death made me feel so emotional because that was one of the saddest scenes in any Spider-Man movie. And plus, I just loved Gwen's character, so I was super bummed when she died. Hearing how he lost his way after her death, but is trying to be the better man that she knew he was, is heartbreaking, but also realistic and moving. I was on the verge of tears when he finally got his redemption by saving MJ, and he just looks into her eyes as he's tearing up. That full circle moment was incredible, and I'm so glad that they did that for his character. Please give us an amazing Spider-Man 3, please. As for Tobey's Peter, I like that he acts as the mentor to both of them really, as he is the oldest and has the most experience as Spider-Man, using his hindsight to stop Tom's Peter from killing Norman, ruining his life. Seeing him talk to Otto after he saves them from Electro was such a wholesome moment, bringing back all those good memories of Spider-Man 2. And speaking to this point, the way that Andrew and Tobey react and talk to their villains was really cool, as all the interactions felt authentic to how they actually would react to them in their own movies. You can tell so clearly that the writers of this movie truly love Spider-Man and all the movies that have come before, as it really feels like a love letter to all fans of the Spider-Man movies. This made me really happy as a lifelong fan of Spidey and these movies, as I have grown up with this character and these films, and they mean a lot to me. Now I do quickly want to address a point about the level of fan service here. I have heard some people say that there is a bit too much fan service and in the end kind of takes away from the movie overall. However, I believe this to be untrue, as I feel that they use just the right amount of nostalgia while also building and fleshing out everyone's respective worlds. Even though there is a lot in this movie, it doesn't feel like a cluster of random events and fan service. It just feels like a great Spider-Man movie with a lot of heart. Now, another major point that I want to talk about is that I love the way they showed Peter's humanity by the fact that he will do whatever it takes to save lives, even if it's the lives of supervillains. The fact that he wants to cure all of them and make sure that they don't die in their respective universes is such a genuine and real aspect of his character that sets him apart from a lot of other superheroes. He's a good human being at heart and will do anything to save a life, even if it means the destruction of his own. This is shown at the end of the movie when he essentially sacrifices his friendships and love life by having everyone forget who he is. It was so impactful for him to recognize the effect of having people know his identity and the harm it causes them, as when he goes to find Ned and MJ, he ends up not telling them everything that has happened and lets them live their lives. This shows Peter's growing maturity, as well as displaying this aspect of humanity that is rarely seen by others. It will be really interesting in the next trilogy of movies to see the major effects of this decision and how it affects his personal life. Maybe this will pave the way for us to get to see characters like this universe's version of Gwen Stacy, or even Felicia Hardy. Thinking about all the new characters that could show up in this trilogy is making me super excited for the future of Spider-Man movies. I feel that this move of mind-wiping everyone was needed, as well as being very bold, as they essentially cut Tom Holland's Spider-Man from the MCU. Now, yes, they are still MCU movies, but what I mean is that everyone in the MCU now doesn't know who he is anymore, allowing the writers greater freedom to explore just the character of Spider-Man without worrying about having to tie him into everyone else's story. Because he's such a great character, you really don't need to worry if he can stand on his own, as this has been proven time and again. The future is indeed looking bright for Tom Holland's Spider-Man. In all, this movie was absolutely fantastic, blending in comedy, heart, emotion, and action all perfectly. Every character was authentic to who they are and felt right in this universe. It was an emotional roller coaster, but one every fan of Spider-Man needs to ride. This is by far the best MCU movie since Infinity War, and should make every fan of the MCU reevaluate their list of best superhero movies. I can't recommend this movie enough. Everyone needs to go see it. So that's the end of my review. Thank you so much for watching. What did you all think of this movie? Did you love it as much as I did, or did it not live up to your expectations? Let me know all of this in the comments below. Links to my Discord and gaming channel are down below if you want to come hang out and chat with a great community of fellow comic book fans. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. So thanks again everyone, and this is the Rewriter, riding out.